Thank you so much, Sophia, for introductions. So, very good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. So, my session, I'm a little anxious, but I will allow my anxiety to fuel my presentation. Okay. So, thank you. I will be speaking on the paradigm shift in moving from a medical model to the social model. As a part of my presentation, I will be drawing a lot of my learnings from what I have done on the field as a part of the Bapu Trust for Research on Mind and Discourse, the organization which works in low-income communities of Pune city in India. And hopefully some of these reflections and examples will put forth certain ways of moving ahead in being able to make this transition from a biomedical based model to a social based model. Now I'm going to try and use this. It worked. Yeah, okay. So a little bit about the Bapu Trust, just to give you a little context. The Bapu Trust for Research on Mind and Discourse, they work in about 5 areas, as you can see put up on the presentation over here. Research, advocacy, services, trainings, organizational development and leadership. The scope of the works is starting from the local level, so working really intensively in the grassroots, working in different states of India, so the national level as well as the regional level. So through the TCI Asia Pacific Forum, really reaching out to a number of countries in the Asia, Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific region. So, okay. I will be focusing on the services part of the program for this particular presentation. Okay. I want to begin a little bit with sharing about the mission statement of the services program. It reads like this. The services program is called as Seher. Seher means dawn. It is the mission of the Seher Urban Mental Health and Inclusion Program in low-income communities is to enable communities to be psychologically contained, their emotional needs met, being tolerant and inclusive of the mental health needs of a diversity of people, including those with disabilities, through concerted multi-level actions and enculturing a very high level of partnerships, both government as well as non-government, Seher facilitates the creation of caring communities. So the reason I have shared the mission of the Seher program is because I think a lot of what the mission is about drives our program and has enabled us to make the transition ourselves. When we speak about enabling communities, so we are not speaking about enabling just an individual or not enabling only persons with psychosocial disabilities, but enabling many communities of which persons with psychosocial disabilities are a part. Being tolerant and inclusive of the mental health needs of a diversity. So when it comes to mental health needs, it's not just persons with very high needs for support who require practices, interventions to stay well, to be a part of the society, to be included, to participate. It's everybody. Unfortunately, in mental health, the only people we seem to be speaking about are persons who have schizophrenia, psychosis. But what happens to a lot other people who want to be well, they want to practice they want to have good mental health practices. They want to, what about people who are feeling anxious? What about people who come across day-to-day stressors? So it's really looking at a diversity of people with a diversity of needs and requirements to be included in communities. Concerted multi-level actions. So it's not one action, it's many actions done together by different people at different points of time. And high level of partnerships. Of course, as we move in through the presentation, we will see a lot more with examples how each of these has been translated as an application in the field. Creation of caring communities. So that is the foundation which holds up service program together. Moving on to the next one. So I think this is where the presentation actually starts from. So sharing some of the learnings in through the Seher program. When we started the Seher program, we thought we were very good service providers because we were providing counseling, individual counseling, we were providing group counseling sessions, we had some peers who were offering support to others, we were in touch with the public hospitals, we had a psychiatrist way back in our team, we used to make referrals. So as a service program, we felt quite content. And then over the years, after doing this for a couple of years, we woke up. We woke up because we realized that people with high needs for support, people who are really at the disability side of the mental health spectrum, they were just in our system, it's as if they have come to the Seher program for services. They continue to be with us for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We were providing them with many services, but they were not feeling included as a part of the society. Our methods to enable full participation and effective participation for persons with disabilities had failed, and it was a very strong wake-up call for us. And then we started questioning our own methods. Some of the first question that that helped us in our reflections was, we were operating from a biomedical model, so we were very much focused on recovery. We wanted the person to get better and better and better. And the question that was driving our services was, for a person to get better, what can be offered? So when we ask this question, we get about 5 or 6 answers. You can send them for counseling, you can refer them to a doctor, perhaps they can team up with some peers. What else? How else can they get better? Maybe have some group sessions for them, couple of self-care methods. What else? But in spite of providing these 5 or 6 things, are people feeling included? No, they were not feeling included, and they were not able to participate as a part of the community. We changed our question from the biomedical model to the disability model. So we asked ourselves, what can we do to ensure that persons with psychosocial disabilities feel included? We had 200 answers. So just by reframing our question from a biomedical model to a disability model, we got many opportunities and methods which can be applied on the field, in people's lives, in communities, to enable their full and effective participation. So that was the first thing which fueled our, the transition in our program. The second was, who is the decision maker? Again, as service providers, when somebody came to us for services, say counseling or, somebody asking for help and support, we would often direct the person. Maybe you should go for a couple of counseling sessions, you'll feel better. The mistake that we were doing was, we thought we were doing supported decision making. We were not. We were imposing what we thought was good for the person. And we were directing them. in seeing and in benefiting from things which we thought was good for them. So go to a doctor, go for counseling, why don't you team up with some peers? So the decision maker was not the person, but it was the family and it was the service providers. So that was the other big transition and an important one we made in our program. So when somebody comes to us now, we ask the person, okay, so what is it that you want to do? These things are happening to you. You are facing a lot of difficulties. You are experiencing distress. You are facing many, many barriers. What do you want to do about this? Which way do you want to go? So again, coming back, keeping the person at the center of all and every decision making is something which really helped us in making our transition from the formal model of recovery. The next was, when we operated from a recovery-based model, we did not look at the environment. So what is disabling? Like, Montaigne sir said in his presentation, the society imposes barriers, and that becomes disabling. So it was the environment which was erecting many, many barriers at every stage that the person wanted to go. And that is something that we missed in our former way of work with people. So we moved from, to understand what is this disabling environment. How can the environment become enabling environment? And so in context of this, one of the first things we did was, again, coming back to, okay, if somebody with a psychosocial disability is coming to us, what is the notion of consent? So if somebody is coming to me and I am a service provider, or I am a peer, or I am a family member, or I am a neighbor, and they come to me and they tell me about the distress that they are experiencing, how much am I directing them in telling them which way they should go? And so the person listens to, the offer, the advice and the suggestions you are offering, and really, is it the person, and we think that the person has given consent, but really, is it that the person has given consent? When you tell a person, okay, you can either go to a doctor or you can go to a counselor, where is the question of consent? You cannot give me, okay, I have 10 minutes. You cannot give me a spoon and a fork and then tell me, okay, now, you can choose what you want to eat with. Maybe I want to eat with my hands, but nobody is offering me that option. I have got to choose between the spoon and the fork. What choices are we offering to persons to make choice? So again, it's the same thing about if somebody is coming and telling me, I am feeling a lot of distress, I am hearing voices. It's fine. I mean, I find the voices supportive. I don't want them to go away. But can you help me get a job? As service providers, we did not have that option because our option was completely recovery based. All we could do was to offer them about getting better, treating the symptoms, moving on. But this is not what the person required. The person required many, many development supports so that they are able to feel a part of the society. And they were okay with their symptoms, they didn't want to work on that. Who will provide this support? Again, the question of, so when we examined what our program was doing, a lot of us in the program were experts, mental health professionals who were directing the program. We shifted this completely. So our program today, the most number of people present in our program are the grassroots, people who live in the same community where the person with the psychosocial disability is coming from. And we also have a number of persons with psychosocial disability as a part of the program, and a number of actions that are driven in the field are directed by this group. So the experts had little role to play at some points of time, but the community had a big role to play most of the time. Will this result in inclusion? I think I will also rely on Matrika's presentation for that. Moving on to the next one. I think what helped us some of the practical matters was moving beyond symptoms. So instead of asking, how can this person recover, we started asking, how can this person grow and flourish? We examined the language starting from there. Are we referring to persons with psychosocial disabilities as persons, or are we referring to them as people, somebody who's mentally ill, somebody who has bipolar, schizophrenia, somebody who's depressed? So it started in here, internalizing the social model in our speech and then starting from there. So what does the person need to grow and develop? Are we as service providers able to identify these needs, or are we only identifying symptoms? Are we so much looking at fixing the person that we disregard the role that the community has to play, who has put up these barriers around the person? So person is not able to grow and progress and flourish because of these barriers. The first line of support, who will that be? Not the experts, the person themselves, their family, neighborhoods, and extended communities. This is, I think, the last one. So some of the resolutions we made in our design and in our frame of operation was that people with psychosocial needs, they have a number of social and development needs. These are over and beyond the recovery and treatment approach. They speak about growth and development of the person. It's not about fixing the person. Our role as service providers is to facilitate, support them in what their requirements are. How are we able to do this? By partnering with development organizations. The person is at the core of all decisions related to them at all points of time. If somebody is in crisis, we ask them, what do you want us to do right now? And we will see how we are able to do that so that you feel safe and supported. Persons with psychosocial disabilities live in open community with others. This is their natural ecosystem. This is where they can thrive. Not by removing them to a separate special place or segregating them or putting them in clinics and institutions and hospitals. Communities have many resources which can respond in supportive ways if we are flexible enough to look around and allow and step back ourselves and allow other people to come in. We should have a range of alternatives to offer people support, and I think a lot of what people said in the presentations in the morning, there's so many ways that you can, n number of things that you can do to feel happy, to feel safe, to feel in control. Not one way is the right way. Whatever work, I know what I need, so I can decide what works best for me, and so each of you in this room, and people will come and they will offer support and they will offer suggestions. If it works for me, I will take it. If it doesn't work for me, it's fine, I won't take it. So going by that, going by what works for me, going and working with what works for you, I think nobody knows it better. Nobody knows our distress more than ourselves. And therefore, we are the experts. Again, coming back to what Jill Mill had said. So just summing up some of also the examples that different speakers had put forth in the morning. These are just some of them. You can work on your nutrition. People, they want to progress. They want to have jobs which will pay them and enable them to make contributions to their lives and the life of others. Spiritual, resources. Ustaz ji was here yesterday, and a lot of us, myself including, rely heavily on spiritual discourses as something which makes us feel safe. So to be able to, to be given that space, to know how to respond to crisis without imposing recovery and care and treatment, but in a way which the person finds supportive. So always check with the person. Peer supports, foster care arrangements, people who look out for you, a number of referrals to the development based organizations, friends going for sports, running, creative arts, housing requirements, exercising, many kinds of groups, singing groups, clubs. So I think there's so much which is untapped, and the potential for a person to grow and develop and flourish and thrive has not been tapped into. And this is something which really should guide the way forward in moving from the biomedical paradigm to the social paradigm, being led by the person and walking with them, not ahead of them or not after them, and allowing them to walk alone when they wish to. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we will go to the first one. How difficult was it to adapt and create your modules to suit people of other living experiences needs? I think that would go to Ms. Kavita.
Where is the question? There it is. How difficult was it to adapt and create your models to suit people of other living experiences needs? I have not understood the last part of this. What is the meaning of other living experiences
I
needs?
think it could be illnesses.
Sorry?
Illnesses, for mental illnesses, maybe?
Yeah, but I could, so it was difficult to adapt and create because the challenges came a lot in the form of resistance within people who were working as a part of service provision themselves to begin with. So, if we are habituated to a certain way of thinking, if we are habituated to a certain way of offering support, which has been done traditionally over many, many years, to break the habit and cultivate a new one, which is entirely the opposite of what you were doing, is very, very difficult. So a number of the challenges there were, yes, it was challenging, there is no doubt about that. But I think the challenge, it fueled our creativity to come up with solutions. So if somebody tells us, oh, I don't want to take medicines, then what options can we offer them? So that, in spite of not taking medications, their requirements are fulfilled, whatever requirements they are coming with to the organization. So the transition was very difficult, it was full of challenges, but I think, like I said, the community has so many resources and we relied heavily on communities to work together to address most of those challenges.
I think this would go to you, Ms. Kavita. Are there situations where people who need help deny the help offered to them because they think every single suggestion sounds nonsense?
Yeah, I think, and it's also related to the initial question that Matrika was responding to. I think where we, in context of the social and disability model, if you are talking about situation of where people who need help deny the help, one is if they need help, then why would they deny it? They would deny it because the option that you are offering to help them does not suit their requirement. If you are going to buy a dress, you will not come in and the shopkeeper offers you pants or shoes. Of course you will deny it. And you will tell the shopkeeper, I want a dress which is pink in color and it has to have these kind of detailing. I think the denial of help is, we have to examine whether the options we have offered to the person are those as required by the person. Sometimes, like I said, many times people feel that they don't want to come for counseling sessions. No, they don't want to engage with arts-based therapy. All they want is housing. Now, as service providers, are we able to see that, accept that, recognize that, and then work with them to offer them housing, which is the help they want. They don't want individual counseling, and they don't want arts-based therapies or other help which you are offering.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kavita, and also to Mr. Matrika for all of this wonderful information and giving us fresh insights and ideas on how to social inclusion. Yeah.